When something good happens in my life, when I do something that I'm rather proud of, there are two people I call immediately. And the first one, obviously, my husband. The second one, my mom. Is there anybody who will be as proud of your accomplishments as your parents? And we saw that same phenomenon happen in a very strange way on October 7th. Israel released a number of pieces of evidence in the aftermath of that day. And one of those pieces of evidence is the recording of a conversation between a Hamas terrorist and his parents back in Gaza. And what happened was he murdered someone and then used the phone of his victim to call his parents. And the conversation went something like this: Mom, Dad, I just murdered a Jew. Note, a Jew, not an Israeli, a Jew, with my own hands. And the son is so proud of what he's done. He's so proud of his accomplishment that he does the one thing that children right over the world do when they're proud of their accomplishments. They phone their parents. And true as anything, his mother sobs her absolute joy over her son's deeds. Now, in the aftermath of October 7th, Israel released such horrific evidence that piece of evidence, it hardly stands out, but it stuck with me for a reason. And that reason is that it's a symbol of something. It's a symbol of a mindset that celebrates death, that puts death and violence and murder and extermination as the absolute pinnacle of society. And I can't even wrap my mind around it. So here, to help us wade through that, is Itamar Marcus. Itamar, welcome. Let me introduce you. Itamar is one of the foremost experts on the Palestinian Authority in the world. He's the founder and director of the Palestinian Media Watch, an Israeli research organization that is world-renowned for research and analysis into the Palestinian society from a number of perspectives, including the glorification of terror. Now, Palestinian Media Watch's findings are sought after by governments, media outlets, and decision makers around the world, and they've played a central role in correcting the inaccurate narrative about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, Itamar is based here in Jerusalem, but he also travels the world speaking to top decision makers, members of Congress, parliaments, the media, government, etc., presenting the findings that have literally changed the way the world see the Palestinian Authority. Itamar, we're going to jump right in there with the thing that I believe many others, we just don't understand. I have a daughter, she's almost 3 years old. What I want for her is peace, love, joy. I want her ultimately to have a meaningful life. And I think that's where the issue comes in. My definition of meaningful life, I think that just, everyone thinks like that. So yes, let's speak about that disconnect, that the Western society that we just don't understand.
There's definitely a disconnect. You're absolutely right. And I think one of the issues is people think that everyone is like them.
Yeah.
If all I want for my children is a good life and happy life, and they should grow up and get a good profession, married, family, then everybody's the same. But it's not true. People are different, and cultures are different. And by following the Palestinian Authority, what we're finding is that the values that they're inculcating to their children, we see it by finding it in the school books, we see it on children's programs, literally programs for your 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds on television. And we see in educational magazines. Now, what do they want for their children? They're not focusing on their personal, they're focusing on ideological goals, religious goals. They tell the children that they have an obligation to focus on their on literally on destroying Israel and destroying Jews. And I'll just give you a one particularly horrific example of this. Fatah, on their official Facebook page, which had at the time about 200,000 or more followers, young people. So they had a young girl that they put on, and she recited a poem. And the poem was about a boy who didn't finish his food. And the mother says, if you finish your food, I'll give you a present. Okay, he finishes his food, she brings a present. What's the present? It's a rifle. So the child says to the mother, what's this? Is this for me? He says, yes, it's for you. You are not destined for happiness. You're destined for martyrdom. Islam is our weapon, and you, my child, are the ammunition. You're the ammunition. So children, and this is just one example of children being told that they have a purpose that's not themselves, that their self-fulfillment is not the issue. The issue is Islam, the way the Palestinian Authority defines it, and your ammunition for that. Part of that is what we've seen in the last year is incessant numbers of teenage Palestinians going out on terror attacks with the goal not only to kill, but to kill themselves. And we know this because they're leaving farewell letters to their parents. We have them from a 14-year-old boy. He left a farewell letter to his parents. He said, "Mother, don't cry for me. Make sounds of joy. I have asked for martyrdom, and Allah granted my wish." That he turns to his father in the letter, "Father, don't be angry at me. Allah gave me my wish." So the brainwashing of children has been so successful that they have to fight and kill and be killed, that today, this past year, before October 7th, we've had dozens and dozens of Palestinian children, teenagers, young teenagers, going out on terror attacks. Their parents go on TV and say, "My son wanted martyrdom," and some of them even leave these farewell letters.
Now, Itamar, I want to make sure that we're on the same page, and I want to discuss some things that you've just said. For instance, the values. Now, as Jews, as Christians, the ultimate goal for our children is not happiness, or we want our children to have religious values. We do. So when we say religious values, it feels like that phrase, when I say it, it's something different. How do we look at that?
You're absolutely right. I think Jewish Christian values, they're talking about making the world a better place, focusing on improving the lives of other, charity, volunteerism, not having yourself as the center of your world, but having what you can do to improve the world as your dominant values. And of course, it includes yourself, but it also includes others and the world around you, as well as accepting and respecting other people and their way of life. The Palestinian Authority is bringing up its children with a completely different message. The message is subjugate. We've heard numerous children on Palestinian TV, for example, talk about the Jews reciting poems that the Jews are apes and pigs. Well, if Jews are apes and pigs, then why are you going to see Israel as your neighbor? There was a children's program where the children were told that Israelis are barbaric, and they particularly try to target children to kill children. And then it said, so if you're a child under 15 or so, only go outside with your parents because Israelis are trying to kill you. So children are brought up with this kind of hatred. They're going to accept an Israeli. No, they'll feel justified in hating. They'll feel justified in killing because they believe that Israelis want to kill them. And then you put on top of this the Islamic teaching, where the Palestinian Authority, it seems, has looked for every source in Islam to make it seem like Islam wants the Jews to be destroyed, and they pass this on to their kids. Now, there are other Muslim religious leaders around the world who interpret Islam completely differently, but Palestinian Authority Islam is that the Jews are the evil enemy, the Jews are cursed, the Jews have to be fought, and the Jews have to be destroyed.
You're speaking, but in my mind, this is so foreign. This is so foreign to any society that I know of. Let's speak about values. Western values, Western religious values, Jewish Christian values. How does that differ from a radical Islamic value that teaches to hate?
The Jewish value and the Christian value, they're talking about accepting the other. I'll just point out that in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, the most repeated mitzvah, most repeated law, is the one to take care of the stranger, the foreigner, the immigrant. It's 36 times that in various different ways the Bible says, take care of the outsider, the person who's different, the person who's not like you. I mean, that's unbelievable when you're talking about an ancient world where slaves or foreigners were absolutely valueless for themselves. You're talking about the Greeks, the great Greek societies, and the Romans, and look what they had. They had the gladiators, whereas 1,000 years before then, the Bible is saying you have to worry about them 36 times, more than the Sabbath, more than the holidays. So taking care of people who are different than you, who come to live amongst you, who are different, is essentially the highest value within Judaism. Now, what we're seeing in the Palestinian Authority, Islam, is, and it's not just Palestinian, there are others as well, the entire world has to be subjugated under us and has to become like us. No such thing as respecting the other. They all have to be like us. We have heard on Palestinian television, and as well as Hamas television, our flags will fly, the flag of Islam will fly over the White House, the flag of Islam will fly over British Parliament. This is how they see. They see the immigration, the mass immigration of Muslims to Europe with the high birth rates as part of this Islamization of Europe. There are many in Europe today who are waking up to what is happening and understand. In some countries, it's really too late. The process is already reached the point where it's not going to be reversed. But for them, this is part of the whole world ultimately being subjugated. Today, obviously, no Jew and Christian wants the world to be subjugated under their religion, but a good part of the Muslim world still sees itself in that way, and they see their destiny as subjugating all of humanity. There was a sermon a number of years ago on Palestinian television, official Palestinian TV, and he was saying that in the end of time, all the Christians and all the religions will be subjugated under Islam. And he said, and all except for the Jews won't accept subjugation. That's why the Jews have to be killed. And this is on official Palestinian TV. So again, this is something that if we would say this, it would sound racist, but I'm saying this is what was said on Palestinian TV.
Itamar, it sounds unreal. I mean, if something along those lines are on official television, surely it's just once or twice, or surely it's an accident and it'll be fixed. I want to speak about the frequency of this. Is this something we see maybe every second, third month, or is this normal?
It's a consistent message over years. I mean, we've heard it since the first time we heard it was in 2000, where they talked about the end of time coming will not happen until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. That was in the year 2000. And we've heard it on and off. When there's conflict going on, we hear it much, much more frequently, like during the Intifada period, 2000, 2005. And then when there's a pause in the act of terror, and then we'll hear it again when there's violence going on. There was an incredible thing that happened 2 weeks after October 7th. Of course, October 7th was the date of the Hamas attack in southern Israel and the massacre of the 1,200 Israelis, the rapes, beheadings, burning alive, you name it. And as well as the killing of, I think, about 250 Israelis who were at a music festival outdoors with trees and grass and rocks. And 2 weeks afterward, when it came time for the Friday sermons, the Palestinian Authority Ministry of Education sent out its weekly list of talking points for those sermons that all the mosques in the Palestinian Authority will give the same sermons. One of those talking points that the PA told their people was a source in Islam called the Hadith, which says the hour of resurrection, the end of time, will not come until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, which will call out, Muslim servant of Allah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Well, 2 weeks before, Jews were hiding behind rocks and trees, and Muslims went out and massacred them. And what the Palestinian Authority was telling its people is that what happened on October 7th was not just Palestinian nationalism, which we celebrate, it was also Islam. This was part of the bringing of redemption of the whole world by Muslims killing Jews who are hiding behind rocks and trees. That's the only way to interpret that message coming at this time by the Palestinian Authority. So for them, the killing of innocent young people hiding behind rocks and trees is fulfillment of Islam, and this is what Israel is facing, not just in Hamas, but with the Palestinian Authority.
I want to make that distinction. We have been speaking about Fatah, we've been speaking about the Palestinian Authority. How does Fatah and the Palestinian Authority link together?
Okay, so first of all, every example I've given you now is Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. And that's critical because there is a misconception around the world that the problem is Hamas and that the Palestinian Authority is peace-loving. I go even further. I'll say the Palestinian Authority created Hamas. Palestinian Authority, by bringing up its people, by bringing up its children, by having these sermons for years that talk about killing of Jews, by teaching all the children the values that Israel has no right to exist, Jews have no right to exist, Jews are the enemy of Allah. Well, child reaches age 15, 16, 17, say, well, if that's the case, I'm joining Hamas. Because they're doing more about it than the PA is. The PA is telling us who the Jews are, but the Hamas is actually killing them. And the power of Hamas and the strength of Hamas was created by the Palestinian Authority, which controls Palestinian education. Now, what's the fundamental difference between them? There are disagreements between them about the interpretation of religion. As far as they're looking at Jews, there is no difference. They both teach that Jews are cursed of Allah, have to be destroyed. As far as Israel, they all teach, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, they all teach Israel exists on holy Islamic land, Waqf, and therefore every Muslim has a religious obligation, forget nationalism, a religious obligation to liberate all of Palestine, meaning destroy Israel, as a religious obligation. Hamas says this, and Fatah says this, and the PA religious leaders all say it. Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA, his advisor on Islam, Mahmoud al-Abash, who's also the head of the Sharia courts, he has said this explicitly. He has said this explicitly, that no Palestinian will ever accept, no Muslim will ever accept Israel's existence on even a millimeter of Islamic land, meaning Israel has to be destroyed. So when it comes to Israel and Jews, Hamas and Fatah are the same, just Hamas has been, from their perspective, more successful than the PA at murdering Jews.
My goodness. So what this means ultimately is two-state solution. What are you talking about? There's no possibility of a two-state solution, because if the Palestinian people are taught from birth that no millimeter of Palestinian land can be given to the Jewish people, where will the other state be?
Exactly. And the Palestinian Authority, when it talks about a two-state solution, it's talking about a two-state interim solution. Because the state that they're talking about is going to then have the ability, they believe, to finish up and destroy Israel. One of the people who said this explicitly was a person named Abbas Zaki. He's a member of the Fatah Central Committee. He's close to Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA. He's been his representative, even speaking in his name in certain events. And he was on television, and he said that our political plan is to ask for the borders of 1967, meaning Judea and Samaria, Gaza Strip, Jerusalem. He said, why is that? Even though the president's plan is all of Palestine, but we say that because, these are his words, everyone knows Israel can't survive those borders.
My goodness.
Everyone knows. So this is the Palestinian Authority leader. He knows, and of course Israel can't. Look at a map. We're talking about borders which are 10 kilometers wide, in some places even less. think of how deep the terrorists invaded into southern Israel. Far more than that. Look at what Israel has now, the whole southern Israel, far more than 10 kilometers they've all evacuated. Well, 10 kilometers is the sea from Judea and Samaria, from the old ceasefire lines pre-1967. So you're talking about, and you've got millions, 5-6 million Israelis, or maybe more, living within Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, all of these areas. So were there to be a Palestinian state with the ideology that we know of it, who would spend the next 5, 10, 15 years building up its tunnels, building up its armaments, where are we going to put those Israelis? Well, the PA believes put them into the sea. And that's what a Palestinian Authority state on the grounds of Judea and Samaria would mean, that we are condemned for war and terror forever, until we would then at some point have to conquer the Judea and Samaria again, as we conquered Gaza just now.
Itamar, now we've spoken about Palestinian official television. We've spoken about sermons in mosques. Can you give me other practical examples? Or are we looking at basically television, mosques, or is this something that is being integrated into every area of Palestinian daily life?
So, first of all, we've been talking about television, but the problem isn't the television. I'm talking about the leaders. The television for us is a window to see what the leaders are telling the people. If we see a children's program on TV, the problem is not the television. The problem is the messages coming to the children. It's the ideology. And that's why the problem is not the media. It's the Palestinian Authority leadership. I mentioned before what Mahmoud al-Abbas, the advisor, said about Jews, that we're getting the advisor's message. Everything I'm telling you is Palestinian leadership. Everything I'm telling you, this is not a problem of a person who runs Palestinian TV. This is a problem of the Palestinian Authority leadership. The anti-Semitism that is expressed by leaders on Palestinian Authority television, the problem is the anti-Semitism and the leaders. It's not a TV. And I'll just give you an example. One of the fundamentals of Palestinian Authority anti-Semitism and their ideology is that the Jews have no history in the land of Israel. So then why did Jews decide to create a state here? And the answer is, the Jews never decided to create a state there. It was the Europeans who suffered for centuries from the Jews and who killed them for centuries because they were so evil. They finally decided to solve their Jewish problem by taking land where Jews had never been, planting them there, creating Zionism, and that's why Israel exists, because the world wanted to get rid of its Jews. A Palestinian researcher was on television toward the end of October, again, a few weeks after the horrific massacres, and there was a lot of sympathy for Israel around the world. So he went on TV and he said, why is there so much sympathy for the Jews, for Israel? And he explained, he said, because Europe succeeded in getting rid of its human waste, and they're afraid if Israel becomes weak, there's going to be a reverse migration of the human waste back to Europe. Now, that is Palestinian Authority ideology. Television for us is the window. And by the way, one of the people who said that, and I talk again about the leaders, Mahmoud Abbas himself, speaking last year in the United Nations, where he goes every year, speaking at the United Nations in May, he condemned the existence of colonial Israel, and he condemned Britain and the United States, he said, for creating this colonial implant. And then he said, the truth is, you wanted a colonial implant to represent colonialism in the Middle East, and you also wanted to get rid of you Jews, two birds with one stone. Mahmoud Abbas in the UN. And you know what? He's welcomed in Western countries. He's welcomed in Washington. He's welcome. How can they do this? His anti-Semitism is so fundamental. He also said last year that Hitler killed the Jews, not because they were Jews, but because of their social role. They were causing danger. That's why he hated them. That's why Europeans. This is the head of the Palestinian Authority. And this is the authority that Britain today, United States, are talking about a two-state solution with this kind of ideology. It's willful blindness.
The production of this investigative series is made possible by the generous donations of Christians from around the world. You can also make a difference by supporting this initiative. We want you to share, to give, and be a voice so that we can produce more series like this. The truth about what is happening here in Israel and around the world must be told, and it must go out. Please click on the link to donate.
How do they just gloss over history and historic proof and archaeology? How is that? How do they explain that?
They deny that there ever was a Jewish history. Sometimes it's so absurd. There's a Palestinian educational magazine, Fatah, educational magazine for children. They showed a picture of an ancient coin, which was an ancient shekel. An ancient shekel was the Jewish coin. This one was during the Persian era, and it actually had the word on it, Yehud, in ancient Hebrew, Yud Hey Dalet, Judean, Judea. And the current Israeli shekel has the same design as that coin. So what did they do for the children? They showed a picture of the ancient shekel, they showed a picture of the new shekel, and they say, look, this is our ancient Palestinian coin, and the Jews have stolen it. Just like they steal everything of ours, they stole our ancient coin. So that's basically what they do. They turn all of Jewish history into Palestinian history. In the same children's magazine, they say, our heroic 5,000-year-old Palestinian nation fought and defeated the Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, the Hittites, and the Hebrews. We kicked them all out of our land, and just like we kicked them out of our land, we are going to kick out these Zionist invaders. And then it adds to that, just like Algeria expelled the French after so many years of colonialism, more than 100 years of colonialism, so too, and then every French occupier left, so too every single Jew will leave Palestine. That is the world and the history according to the Palestinian Authority. They have been 5,000 years expelling every invader, and they will expel the Jews as well.
So just give it a matter of time. Just wait.
That's right. Just like the Algerians, and they talk about how many years, I forget how many, 100 and something, 50, 60, 70 years. Just like it took them, don't worry, let's keep going, have patience. One of the times they talked about, just like it took us 240 years to get rid of the Crusaders, so too we will get rid of the Zionists.
But Itamar, this is tragic. This is tragic. How children grow up and they're subjected to this. And you mentioned an educational magazine. Let's talk curriculum. What are these children taught in school about Israel? Surely that's better.
They're basically taught the same thing. It's a little different. This is an educational magazine by Fatah. It's given out in the schools, by the way. We have the pictures of them giving out the magazine in the schools. And the reason why everything is so clear in this magazine is because we didn't know about it until a couple of years ago, and we never reported on it. School books, Palestinian Media Watch was already reporting on the school books in 1999, and then we did reports every year, and there was a lot of international pressure on the Palestinians. So the school books have these same messages, but they're a little bit milder. This magazine, I call it the pristine example of Palestinian ideology, because they thought it was under the radar. And what happened was we discovered this magazine, and then we went back and we went through 8 years of magazines. And like I say, this is Fatah. Fatah's senior officials are involved. Their educational division is involved. It's given out all through the Palestinian Authority. These kids take these magazines home and they learn them in school. And there's no Israel. There is no Israel, and it's every part of Israel. They talk about the occupation. It's Jaffa, it's Haifa, it's all of Israel, and it's guaranteed, it's predetermined. It's you will erase this state. The Jews will all leave. This is what the Palestinian kids grow up with, this message. Like I say, it's in the school books as well, but in this magazine, it's pristine. They don't hide anything.
So basically, it's literally a throwback to the Nazi playbook. You repeat a lie often enough, and this has now become not the Palestinian truth, but the Palestinian reality.
Exactly. And when you look at the public opinion polls by Palestinian polling organizations after October 7th, after the atrocities, Hamas has support of 90% of the population.
So let's speak about, we've spoken about the Palestinian Authority now and how that's basically given to the children with their mother's milk.
Yes.
What about Hamas?
Hamas is the same thing, has the same messages. Hamas in the Gaza Strip has more control. On the other hand, the school books that are used throughout the Palestinian Authority, Judea Samaria, as well as the Gaza Strip, are Palestinian Authority school books. The Palestinian Authority never accepted the split. In 2007, there was a civil war. Hamas kicked out the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority never accepted it, so they continue to fund social welfare. They continue to fund a good 40 or more % of their budget goes to the Gaza Strip, including education, including teachers. So the message, and that's what I'm saying, is that the Palestinian Authority educational messages actually strengthen Hamas. In addition, Hamas has its own education that it adds to this in the schools in the Gaza Strip. But fundamentally, it is uniform hate education sponsored by the PA and paid for by Western countries.
So what we're looking at is television, so media. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I'm sure it's on social media. We haven't even spoken about social media yet. What are we seeing on social media?
The social media world of hate is unbelievable. We actually have done a study of, we recently did telegram stations in the Palestinian telegram stations. And we studied about, I think it's close to 300. And we wanted to compare how many of them are Hamas identified and how many Fatah. So before October 7th, Hamas had a small lead in the numbers. After October 7th, there was a massive jump in new Telegram channels, as well as members in those who support Hamas. And the hatred and celebration of killing of Israelis is explicit there. But by the way, the Fatah also celebrated the killings of October 7th. And again, it's not just the social media. We've had Fatah officials on official PATV say things like, "We woke up on October 7th to a morning of joy, celebration, and pride." We had another Fatah official on PATV saying, "October 7th, our heads touched the clouds." We had Jibril Rajoub, top Palestinian leader, saying it was an epic day of heroism. This is Jibril Rajoub. And he's welcome when he travels around the world. He represents Palestinian football to FIFA. He's the head of their sports. He's recognized around the world and he's accepted around the world. And he said October 7th was epic heroism. So there are two issues here, and this is very important for Western viewers to understand this. The Palestinian Authority poisons its people with hate, and the Western world turns away and lets these leaders come and even funds it, and then criticizes Israel when we fight against them. None of this could have continued for all these years. Palestinian Media Watch has been reporting on this literally since 1996 and intensively once the Intifada started. The world has listened. They've condemned the PA 1,000 times. They've condemned the PA, but they do nothing about it.
Why? Why is there this, I don't know, this, yeah, it's wrong, but yeah. Israel, you're wronger. Why? Why is there this disconnect again?
I think the world leaders who undermine Israel by supporting the Palestinian Authority and undermine peace and even undermine the Palestinians by funding the Palestinian Authority fall into two categories. I think there are some of them who hate Israel, period, hate Jews, hate Israel, might be under the surface a little bit. They might not even be aware of that driving force. But some of the statements that we hear from world leaders, from EU leadership, it's just mind-boggling, and it cannot really be happening without that kind of a motivation. And the others might just be unbelievably naive. They're hoping that the Palestinian Authority hatred can be turned off by, like they turn off a light switch. Okay, stop the incitement. I've heard that ridiculous expression. We have to tell Abbas to stop the incitement. Well, you have indoctrinated. You would need not turning off. You need an entire generation of detoxification, re-education. I want to point something out that's really tragic. After World War II, the world recognized the need to detoxify Nazi education. There was the Nazi youth everybody talked about. The German government was not in charge of, culture, education, etc. for a number of years. It was all run by the West. The Nazi Party was in power from 1933 to 1945, altogether 12 years. 12 years of poisoning their people, and the world recognized that they couldn't have an independent statehood for a long time, and it had to be controlled by the outside forces. Well, the Palestinian Authority has been doing this since 1994. We're talking about 30 years. 30 years of poison of Palestinian. So we need, and then they say, okay, give them a state, two-state solution. Ridiculous. Would you have said that to the Nazis? Okay, war's over. Take the same Nazi leadership and put them in power again. Say, okay,
let's try again with a different result, hopefully.
Yes, let's try again with the same Nazi leaders. Well, you can't try again with the same Palestinian Authority leaders and even the population after 30 years. We need a period of detoxification of new leaders, detoxified population, and then we can talk about some kind of Palestinian entity down the line that has more autonomy. Never a state. It's just not within. It's not going to be anything that Israel could live beside when you understand not only their ideology, and I want to point something out that's really tragic here. The Nazi ideology was easier to change because the Nazi ideology was based on a secular nationalism, secular supremacist ideology. The Palestinians have linked their ideology to God himself, to Allah. And therefore, you can have all the Westerners come in and say, it's not nice to say that Jews have to be killed. And they're thinking, oh, yes, I agree with you, it's not nice. But Allah said so, so therefore I can't change my mind. You could come to Nazis, to former Nazis, and re-educate their children after World War II, and they'll say, okay, you're right. But you can't do that with Palestinians who've been brought up that Jews are the problem that Allah wants to eliminate for all of humanity's benefit. Once Palestinians believe that, you're talking about a serious undertaking to detoxify.
So what I'm seeing is it starts with the media. And we all know toddlers, they shouldn't watch television. Do they? Oh, absolutely. So this is what they start on. This is what they hear from their leaders. This is what they hear from the so-called researchers and experts. This is what they read as soon as they can read. This is what they hear every Friday in the mosque. This is what they learn in the school. So obviously it is. And it literally seeps into every part of their existence until it is part of that existence. Now what?
Okay, so what you described is exactly the problem, and that is why Israel is saying, one, there cannot be a Palestinian independent state, because look what they will do. Two, Israel has to have complete security control in Gaza for many, many years to come. Three, Gaza has to be rebuilt culturally and educationally by the West, together with some of the Abraham Accords countries who've actually fixed their school books. And of course, with the supervision of the Western countries, so that every message coming to these children in Gaza. Gaza offers a very interesting opportunity now. It's tragic what happened there, but because everything has been flattened, And I mean, everything, the schools, the whole system, it has to be rebuilt from zero. Once you're rebuilding from zero, it's easier than fixing. And that's the opportunity. And this is the challenge for the West. Don't even think about putting the Palestinian Authority in there. Create something new, build the right thing. And if that's successful, in 10 years down the line, that could be the model for fixing the Palestinian Authority.
It's interesting how we speak about the suffering in Gaza, and as you speak and as you explain, the thing that comes to my mind is this is tragic. This is child abuse. This is the worst kind of child abuse because it becomes part of what that child is. And I think the suffering in Gaza, it's important to point out that it didn't start with the war against Hamas. It started with this. It started with this type of child abuse. And this is the result. October 7th is the result from this root of hatred. This is the fruit.
You're absolutely right, and I want to point out something else. And this is forgotten. The world is looking at the suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza while Israel is seeking out Hamas. And everybody has to understand, Israel, it is terrible suffering, and Israel's not happy about that suffering. But every civilian who has been killed in Gaza, the only ones who are to blame are Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Israel has the right and the obligation to go after Hamas. That the Hamas is hiding behind civilians makes them responsible for every single death. They've hid in schools, they've hid under UNRWA buildings, they're hiding behind them in the streets, they're wearing civilian clothes and then attacking Israelis. They have made every civilian a target. Hamas has done this. So when the world sees these civilian deaths, condemn Hamas. Don't condemn Israel. Israel is not responsible for one death. Hamas is responsible for everything. And I would add, so is the Palestinian Authority, because it was the Palestinian Authority who likewise telegraphed a message to the Gaza Strip saying, don't get out of the way. Don't leave your homes. Stay there. Remain in your homes so that you will also be literally
Martyred.
Martyred, exactly. This is the PA as well. So the PA and Hamas are responsible for the death of every Palestinian civilian. It's tragic, but understand who is responsible.
I feel like so often people come to me and say, the suffering in Gaza, don't you care about the suffering in Gaza? Yes, I care deeply about the suffering in Gaza. It keeps me awake at night, and I want you to care about that suffering too. But let that motivate you to knock on doors, to take to the streets, to demand that Hamas is obliterated, that the people of Gaza will no longer suffer.
Exactly. Hamas has to be obliterated, and also to go back to the Nazi comparison, the UN, believe it or not, the Security Council voted, majority voted for a ceasefire. The United States vetoed it. But I ask the Western world, in World War II, did the world demand or offer Hitler a ceasefire? There were so many civilian casualties. Hitler, how about a ceasefire and then we'll, just No, they didn't offer him a ceasefire. They offered him to surrender or be destroyed. Israel is offering Hamas, if they surrender tomorrow, the war is over. That's the option, surrender or be destroyed. So if people want the Gazans to stop suffering, just like the Nazis had to surrender, they should be telling Hamas, surrender tomorrow, and the war is over.
Now, Itamar, we've spoken about how the Palestinian indoctrination works towards the Jewish people. And it's easy maybe for someone to sit thousands of kilometers away and think, oh, I'm not Jewish, so it doesn't really concern me as a Christian. How do you answer that?
Well, let's just look at how Christians have been treated under the Palestinian Authority. When Israel was in control and ruled in the whole Judea and Samaria, Bethlehem was a Christian city. The population of Bethlehem was about, at one point, I think 86% Christian. and Israel gave it over to the Palestinian Authority. Today it's around 10% Christian.
Why?
Because of the oppression of Christians by the Palestinian Authority. There were recorded cases, I remember in the early years after the PA took over, of rapes of Christian children, of protection money Christian Muslims would demand of the Christian owners of stores, protection money. There was a Palestinian policeman who raped a Christian girl, and he was arrested for about 15 minutes. And they've left. They've just left and emigrated to Europe, some to South America, because the Palestinian Authority is not interested. If you look around the world today in Muslim countries, look what's going on in Pakistan, look what's going on in African countries, in Nigeria, look what's going on in the oppression of Christians by Muslim-led countries is just mind-boggling. I read these summaries regularly as part of just my educating what's going on around the world, and I am shocked that the Christian leaders around the world aren't screaming and yelling from the rooftops. Well, you ask about the PA, the fate of Christianity under Palestinians is essentially going to be the same as it is in all of those countries. It's just that Palestinian Authority doesn't have enough power. They don't have a state and whatever. But just look at Bethlehem, and that's an indicator. Christianity would probably disappear as a force, and the Christians would disappear in the Palestinian Authority. By the way, the only place in the Middle East where the Christian community is growing and thriving is in Israel.
Itamar, I could sit here and speak with you for days on end. But my final question, what do you want to see from us? How can we help practically? What can we do?
I think the truth has to get out. The truth can't be expressed by opinions. It has to be shown. And this is what we at Palestinian Media Watch do. When I go to speak in a parliament or wherever it be, I show the videos. I say, I'm telling you the Palestinian Authority is anti-Semitic. You want to know? Here's the proof. This is Mahmoud Abbas at the UN. Look what he said about Jewish. Here's Palestinian Authority officials. The human waste. Here is all of those things have to be shown. People should go to our website, palwatch.org. You should join our email list so that you can get the latest material, and then you can forward our material to your journalists who you might know, to your members of Congress, to your members of Parliament. Get the word out with facts, with proof. We just released reports last week in British Parliament. We have new reports coming. These are things that every legislator in the world should get, every member of government should get, and PMW needs help. We need more voices spreading our material. Work with us, get that material out, and you will help bring more truth to the world and help Israel.
Thank you, Itamar.
Thank you very much.
It's a mindset that's completely foreign to us. We don't understand it. It's not Western. It doesn't mean it's not out there, and it will not be going away anytime soon. So what can you do? Acknowledge it, and then speak up, speak out. Make sure the world around you knows you are a witness. Use it.